1 month after my wedding, my wife mysteriously disappeared. I called the police, but the search yielded nothing. A year later, I remarried. My new wife, Fang Yan, and I, just 2 months into our marriage, were traveling when we stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A limbless person begging on the street. And I, at a glance, recognized that the person struggling to move on the ground was my ex-wife. I grabbed Fang Yan and hurried away, still shaken by the encounter. Fang Yan asked me what was wrong. I gave her a casual, evasive answer. Thinking back on that scene, I still couldn't believe it. The person lying on the ground was definitely Fang Linlin, my wife from just a year ago. My former wife had such a beautiful face, but now she was reduced to this grotesque, repulsive state. But she had clearly been sold into the mountains. Why was she here? I couldn't understand it. I could only grip Fang Yan's hand and quickly leave. The next day, my former father-in-law, Fang Hai, called me. Xiao Jiang, I heard someone saw Linlin on the street yesterday. My head spun. How did this old man know? Dad, how could Linlin have become like that? Maybe that person misidentified her. Whether it was a mistake or not, as long as there's a sliver of hope that it's Linlin, I have to see for myself. Come with me tomorrow. The old man's tone was firm and burong jirjue. I immediately agreed. Then I went back to my room and made a call. The call connected, and a lazy voice answered on the other end. I said angrily, "This is Jiang Ran. A year ago, I asked you to sell her into the deep mountains. What happened? You can't even handle such a small matter." The voice on the other end replied, "Brother Jiang, don't be angry. A year ago, I did as you asked and sold her into the mountains. After a year of fun, we're tired of her. Looking at her now is disgusting. Why not let her earn us some extra cash? After all, we have to make the most of her, right? I don't care what you do, but now that word of her being here has spread, you'd better get her out of here if you don't want to get burned." I paused and continued. "You know her family situation? If her father traces it back to you, do you think you'll have a way out?" Silence hung in the air for a few seconds before a chuckle broke through. "Brother Jiang, don't you worry. Getting her out is a piece of cake. But, you know the brothers need a little something sweet to get things done. How about sending us another chick?" I thought for a moment. "You have your eye on the one with me, haven't you?" "Let me tell you, not right now. Things are a bit hot at the moment. If you don't want trouble, lie low. I'll send her over when things cool down." "All right, Brother Jiang, you're the man." He hung up, sounding pleased. I looked at Fang Yan bustling about in the kitchen, a daring thought crossing my mind. The next day, I accompanied my former father-in-law and a group of bodyguards on a search. We scoured all day, but returned empty-handed. In the office of Fang's group, Fang Hai sat in his executive chair, still vigorous despite being over 60. A predatory glint resided in his eyes. This was the man who, through sheer force of will, had built this massive corporation. He fixed me with a sharp gaze. "Xiao Jiang, I've always felt that Linlin's disappearance is suspicious. How did those kidnappers know about her schedule that day? I suspect we have an inside man." I pondered for a moment. "Dad, I don't agree. Linlin has always been kind to everyone, never making enemies. I still think those people were after money. Ultimately, this is all my fault. If I had been with her that day, she wouldn't have been kidnapped. I deserve to die." I slapped myself hard several times. My face immediately swelled up, and blood trickled from the corner of my mouth. Fang Hai watched coldly, making no attempt to stop me. A knock sounded at the door. Fang Yan rushed in. Seeing the wounds on my face, she immediately cried out, "Uncle, why are you making things difficult for my husband? It's been a year since Sister Linlin's disappearance. My husband has been working tirelessly for the company, which is enough to make up for his guilt, isn't it? Yan, don't be disrespectful to your uncle." I quickly took Fang Yan's hand and looked at Fang Hai. "Dad, Yan is still young and speaks without thinking. Please don't take it to heart." "Of course I won't. I watch Yan grow up. She's like a daughter to me. I naturally wouldn't hold it against her. But you, both my daughters insisted on marrying you. You've already lost Linlin. If anything happens to Yan, if she suffers any grievances because of you, I'll skin you alive." His voice hardened significantly on the last sentence. Only after repeatedly assuring Fang Hai that I would never let Yan suffer any grievance was I able to escape. "Uncle is really something, taking his anger out on you just because he can't find my cousin." Fang Yan continued to chatter beside me. "Honey, next time Uncle looks for you, you must tell me." I frowned, silencing her incessant chatter with a low growl. Fang Yan was stunned for a moment, then her eyes reddened. "Honey, I think you've changed. You said you'd be good to me forever, but it hasn't been long, and you're already yelling at me." Remembering Fang Yan's usefulness, I suppressed my impatience and coaxed her for a good while, finally promising to buy her favorite handbag before her mood improved. Honey, I know you still can't forget my cousin. Don't worry, I'll look for her with you. I'll always be by your side. Fang Yan said these words to me as we waved goodbye. My steps faltered. I scoffed, then turned and left. Deep in my memory, someone else had also said they would always be by my side, but in the end, my ex-wife, Fang Linlin, was the only daughter of Fang Hai, the company's CEO, and was spoiled beyond measure. I spent 3 months pursuing her, culminating in a perfectly executed act of heroism. In a dark corner, Fang Linlin trembled as a small-time thug advanced on her, and I, at the crucial moment, stepped forward, ending my pursuit by receiving a knife wound from the thug as the price. But she would never know that it was a prearranged act of heroism. Cliched, but effective. When Fang Linlin announced our relationship, Fang Hai vehemently opposed it. Finally, Fang Linlin secretly obtained our marriage certificate, forcing Fang Hai to give in. 3 months after Fang Linlin's disappearance, her cousin, Fang Yan, actively pursued me. Fang Yan was the daughter of Fang Hai's elder brother. Orphaned at a young age, she was raised by Fang Hai. Fang Hai doted on his niece. I seized the opportunity and accepted Fang Yan's advances. Fang Hai opposed this as well, but both Fang's sisters were stubborn and wouldn't listen to reason. In the end, Fang Yan threatened suicide, forcing Fang Hai to agree to our marriage. With the status of the company's CEO's son-in-law, my position rose rapidly. Those who usually looked down on me came fawning over me, trying to curry favor. And Fang Yan, she was head over heels in love with me. All my flaws were virtues in her eyes. Everything I did was perfect in her eyes. Even if I stayed out all night, she could proudly explain to others, "That's my amazing husband. The entire company rests on his shoulders." How could he not be busy? At the company, I was now second only to one person above tens of thousands. Those who had objections, I fired directly. No one dared to utter a word of dissent. The next day, the old man, Fang Hai, called me again. On the phone, Fang Hai, somehow knowing the location where Fang Linlin had been trafficked, wanted me to go with him to find her. I readily agreed. "Dad, don't worry. A day as husband and wife means 100 days of grace. As long as there's a sliver of hope, I won't give up." As we were preparing to leave, Fang Yan, having somehow gotten wind of it, insisted on going along. Fang Hai couldn't refuse her, so he agreed and immediately assigned 5 bodyguards for her close protection. The Fang group was powerful. We took a helicopter directly. About 50 people came along. After the helicopter had been flying for about 10 hours, the pilot, Old Wang, spoke. "We're here, preparing to land." The destination was a desolate village, backed by mountains. As soon as the villagers saw us, they immediately became wary. Fang Hai directly ordered a search, instantly causing chaos. The villagers complained bitterly. Those who resisted strongly were beaten mercilessly by the bodyguards. For him, beating a few people to death was no big deal. Fang Yan, always playful in a new place, insisted on going elsewhere for a stroll. Fang Hai indulged her, only instructing the bodyguards to protect her well. As the sun set in the west, the bodyguards returned one after another, empty-handed. Fang Hai flew into a rage. "You bunch of useless fools. You can't even find a single person. I might as well raise a pack of dogs. Useless. Useless. If I find out who took Linlin, I'll tear him limb from limb." Fang Hai cursed furiously, even using the term lousy, showing his extreme anger. Bodyguards knelt on the floor, none daring to utter a sound. First hope, then disappointment, hope again, and disappointment once more. Old man, savor this feeling slowly. What Fang Hai didn't know was that I leaked this information to him, and Fang Linlin had already been transferred. I stayed here for 3 days without any news. Fang Hai's mood worsened with each passing day, and those beneath him dared not even breathe loudly in his presence. Only Fang Yan, carefree, continued to play by herself. On the 4th day, Fang Yan disappeared. The bodyguards assigned to protect her were knocked unconscious, and when they awoke, their young mistress was gone. Terrified, the bodyguards rushed to inform Fang Hai. I couldn't even imagine Fang Hai's expression. Even from outside the door, I could hear the crashing of objects and roaring from within. Another bodyguard brought a piece of torn cloth, on which words were written in blood. The bodyguard looked at the closed door, hesitating to approach. I stepped forward and took the cloth, the bodyguard looking at me gratefully. I waved him away. Controlling my expression, I strode forward and pushed the door open. "Dad, look at this." As expected, a vase came hurtling towards me. I dodged. The vase crashed against the wall behind me, shattering into pieces. "Dad, don't get angry yet, there's news." I held out the blood-stained scrap of cloth. Written on it were the words, "Dad, save me." Fang Hai snatched it, looked at it for a moment, his eyes darkening. It's Linlin's handwriting, Dad. It's Linlin's handwriting. Linlin's still alive. I exclaimed excitedly. Linlin's still alive, that's wonderful. I was afraid I'd never see her again. She's alive, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Perhaps infected by my emotions, Fang Hai murmured, "It's good she's alive, it's good she's alive." The phone rang at that moment. Fang Hai glanced at me and waved me out. The moment I closed the door, a mocking smile curled my lips. The show has begun. The kidnappers called the old man, demanding he bring 50 million to a designated location in Vietnam for the exchange. Money for people. The old man agreed immediately. His only request was to see the Fang sisters safe and sound. A sneer came from the other end of the line. "Mr. Fang, you can't be too greedy." The old man, enraged, slammed his phone on the ground. One day later, we arrived at the exchange location. The other party communicated with the old man via phone. Finally, the exchange location was set at Paradise Bar. Upon arriving at the entrance, several men in black immediately stepped forward, blindfolded us, and let us inside. After walking for an unknown amount of time, we finally stopped. The blindfolds were removed, and everything before us came into view. The huge room was filled with various torture devices. In the center of the room, a burly man with a scar across his face sat on a leather sofa. Behind the sofa stood more than a dozen well-trained elite thugs. "Oh dear, how can you treat your guests like this?" Scarface said to the old man. "Mr. Fang, I'm so sorry. We're just a bunch of roughnecks. Don't mind us." Despite his apology, the malice on his face was evident. "Cut the crap. We brought the money. Where are the people?" I asked. Scarface chuckled, then said, "Mr. Fang, I made it very clear on the phone that you could only come alone. But you brought not only your son-in-law, but also a whole bunch of bodyguards. This makes things very difficult for me." The old man's expression shifted. "How did you know I brought bodyguards?" Scarface's gaze landed on me. I had a bad feeling. Naturally, someone tipped us off. Otherwise, how could we have captured everyone so smoothly? The old man's gaze followed, settling on me. I quickly spoke up. "Dad, don't let him drive a wedge between us. We're family. He just wants us to turn on each other." I was about to continue when Scarface interrupted. "Young man, what's the rush? I didn't say the informant was you. Don't incriminate yourself." My face darkened. I said in a low voice, "We brought the money. Are you going back on your word?" "You're the ones going back on your word. We told you not to bring anyone, but not only did you bring people, you even called the police. Do you really think I, Scarface, a vegetarian?" His expression turned grim as he finished speaking. As his voice fell, the thugs behind him surged forward and tied us up. My heart sank. That old fool, he actually called the police? Scarface continued. "Courtesy demands reciprocity. I should return the favor." He pressed something on the sofa, and a large curtain suddenly appeared on the adjacent wall. On the curtain were Fang Linlin and Fang Yan. Fang Linlin's limbs were bandaged. Though her face was grim, one could still discern her features from before she was disfigured. Fang Yan's hair was disheveled, her eyes vacant, her clothes torn. One side of her face was swollen, with a bright red handprint on her cheek. She had clearly been abused. "You bastard!" Fang Hai roared in fury. "President Fang, if you curse one more time, those two will have to go through what just happened again. This time, if my men are careless and kill them, I won't be held responsible." Scarface said with a smile, but his words sent chills down everyone's spines. "What exactly do you want?" Fang Hai's fists clenched, knuckles cracking as he gritted his teeth, suppressing his rage. Scarface gestured to the person behind him, who immediately brought over a document. "As long as President Fang signs this, you can all leave safely." On the document, the words "Fang Group Equity Transfer Agreement" were starkly visible. "Dream on. I'll die before I sign." Fang Hai struggled, desperately trying to break free from his restraints, but to no avail. "In that case, I apologize, President Fang." Scarface signaled, and the thugs on the side filed into the room where the two sisters were being held. They advanced on the two sisters step by step. The video was then broadcast on the big screen. In the video, the women's pleas, curses, the ripping of clothes, and the men's panting were incessant. The entire scene was unbearable to watch. "Bastards, bastards, I'll kill you all." Despite Fang Hai's heart-wrenching howls, Scarface remained indifferent. "Stop. All of you stop. Stop it." Fang Hai's burning hatred gradually gave way to resignation. I'll sign. The corners of Scarface's mouth curled up into a smile. Wouldn't it have been better if President Fang had been so sensible earlier? My eyes were fixed on the document, watching as the old man signed his name with trembling hands. After confirming that everything was correct, Scarface waved his hand, signaling his men to take Fang Hai away. As he was being led out, Fang Hai cursed incessantly about untrustworthy villains and broken promises. Scarface simply responded with a cruel smile, ignoring him. "Brother Jiang, I really owe you one." My restraints were quickly removed. Scarface smiled at me. I looked at the document and respectfully handed it to him. Everything was in place. Now, all that remained was to take the equity transfer agreement to the company for notarization. Once successful, Fang Hai would be left with nothing. I accompanied Scarface to the company. The notarization and transfer proceeded incredibly smoothly, so much so that Scarface felt a sense of unreality. "Brother Jiang Ran, did we succeed?" Back in the office, Scarface still couldn't quite believe it. The entire process had felt preordained. "Naturally, you're the head honcho of the Fang group now," I said with a smile. Scarface's hearty laughter echoed throughout the office. At that moment, the door was flung open from the outside. The door frame slammed against the wall and bounced back, buzzing. Scarface's laughter abruptly ceased, his gaze turning to the newcomer in anger. A group of police officers filed in. The leader walked up to Scarface, holding an arrest warrant. "The Fang Group owes 300 billion in debt and has evaded taxes. We are now arresting the person in charge." Scarface's eyes widened. Impossible. How could such a large group owe so much? He hadn't finished speaking when he seemed to realize something, turning his head to look at me. It's you, isn't it? You planned all of this." I shrugged and spread my hands. "I don't know what you're talking about." At this moment, the conference room door was pushed open again. Fang Hai, in a black suit and followed by, "You, how could you?" Scarface looked incredulous. He had clearly told his men to keep a close watch on him. His gaze shifted to the person behind him, and he suddenly realized something. "Jiang Ran, you dare to betray me. I'll drag you down with me, even if it's the last thing I do." He pulled a gun from his clothes, the muzzle aimed directly at me. Everything happened in a flash. I reacted instantly, throwing myself backward. The bullet grazed my side. Seeing that I had dodged successfully, he immediately shifted the gun towards Fang Hai. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. "Dad, watch out!" I lunged forward, taking the fatal bullet for him. As I fell, I saw the disbelief on his face. The bodyguards behind him reacted immediately, subduing and pinning him down. I was sent to the best hospital in the city. When I opened my eyes again, Fang Yan was sitting beside me. There were still tear streaks on her face, and she looked haggard. Seeing me awake, she immediately rushed forward to support me, choking back sobs. "Husband, you're finally awake. I thought I would never see you again. Woo, you scare me to death." I comforted her for a while, which finally calmed her down. She told me that while I was unconscious, Scarface had been sent to prison, and Fang Hai had already pulled some strings to make his life a living hell. Fang Hai had taken over Fang's group again, and she and her sister had returned safely. Everything seemed to have returned to its starting point overnight. Back to square one? How is that possible? How can a shattered mirror be pieced back together? "Honey, you mustn't be so foolish next time. Father has bodyguards. Those people can't hurt him," I said unhappily. "Yin, you must remember, everything we have is given by Dad. Without Dad, we wouldn't be where we are today. We must be grateful. We must know how to repay kindness. Don't say such things again next time. Dad will be sad to hear it." Fang Yan pursed her lips and softly hummed in agreement. I heard the footsteps outside the ward gradually receding. After recovering from my injuries, I was immediately discharged and returned to the company. Because of this incident, my position rose again. Fang Hai also seemed to be relieved about me, entrusting me with full responsibility for all matters, big and small, in the company. I fearfully declined, but Fang Hai refused with displeasure. He said, "You are my son-in-law, half a son to me. We are family. This huge company will be handed over to you eventually. It's also thanks to your plan this time that Linlin and Yan were rescued safely. We're family. There's no need for formalities. If I don't entrust these matters to you, who else can I trust?" I was overwhelmed with gratitude and repeatedly assured him that I would not fail his expectations. Fang Hai nodded in satisfaction, but in my heart, I knew that he didn't fully trust me. Otherwise, his confidant wouldn't be following me every step of the way, nominally assisting, but actually monitoring. But what he didn't know was that his confidant, Li Huai, was also a man of great depth. Behind all of this, there was also Li Huai's instigation. Just like that, Li Huai and I joined forces and emptied out all the shares of his company, sold off all his assets. Now, Fang's group is just an empty shell. By the time he received the news, I had already taken Fang Yan and Fang Linlin to the suburbs. In a suburban villa, Fang Yan and Fang Linlin were tightly bound to chairs. I sat on the sofa, watching their terrified expressions with amusement. Fang Linlin's limbs, having been reattached with expensive prosthetics by Fang Hai, now moved as if they were natural. Their mouths were gagged, and they could only make muffled sounds. I knew I must have looked like a demon. Fang Hai should be on his way by now. Estimating the time, I removed the gags from their mouths. Time's up. It's time to settle this. Why? Jiang Ran, my father treated you well. Why did you betray him? Husband, what's wrong with you? What happened? Untie us. The two sisters struggled desperately, trying to break free from the ropes, but to no avail. Around each of their necks hung a miniature time bomb. Shoo! I made a hushing gesture and slowly began. Let me tell you a story. After I finish, you'll understand everything. Without waiting for their response, I continued. Once upon a time, in a remote village, there lived a young man. He had never done anything wrong in his life. Everyone who met him described him as polite, helpful, and humble. He never made enemies. His home was a place of harmony and peace. He was the first from his village to pass the civil service exam and secure a position in the city. He dreamt of making a name for himself, making his parents proud, and making his village proud. He had a childhood sweetheart, and they shared everything. The day he passed the exam was also the day he married her. No matter what he did, his wife supported him without hesitation. Later, he was assigned to the best middle school in the city, a school filled with wealthy and influential children. There, he worked diligently and conscientiously. In his class, there was a student who consistently ranked near the bottom. He dedicated all his free time to tutoring her. The results were remarkable. By the final exams, the student's ranking had soared into the top 10. But then, rumors began to spread. Some said he was after the student's family's money. Some said he was attracted to her looks. Others whispered that he had touched her inappropriately. When the rumors first surfaced, the teacher believed that his innocence would be self-evident, so he never bothered to defend himself. He was wrong. He assumed the rumors would fade with time. But he underestimated the power of gossip, how quickly it could spread like wildfire. The rumors intensified until they reached the Education Bureau, which sent investigators. The student, however, turned on him, claiming that he had taken advantage of her during the tutoring sessions. This accusation plunged the teacher into an abyss. The parents of his students demanded refunds and withdrew their children. To quell the uproar, the school forced him to resign. Later, someone posted the story online, where it instantly became a source of ridicule. Everywhere he went, people pointed and whispered. He searched for work, but every door was slammed in his face. Even the lowliest dishwashing jobs rejected him. His parents, ashamed of him, severed all ties. It was the lowest point of his life, but thankfully his wife stayed by his side. He wanted to ask the child why he had slandered him. He hoped the child would clear his name, but the child simply said, "It was just a joke." He exploded in rage. Just a joke, but it had ruined everything. It was the first time he'd ever lost his temper, and the child started crying in fear. The crying brought the child's father, who, without asking any questions, ordered his bodyguards to beat him and throw him out. It was pouring outside. He returned home, soaked to the bone. His wife didn't utter a single word of reproach, instead showing only concern. He thought, for his wife, he had to pull himself together. The next day, the headline, "Teacher Repeatedly Molests Female Student," dominated the news. He and his wife were subjected to stares and whispers wherever they went. Their landlord threw their belongings out. A mob of netizens, ignorant of the truth, hurled abuse online. He and his wife had nowhere to go and found shelter in an abandoned hut. Through all this, his wife remained by his side, without complaint or regret. The next day, he went out looking for work as usual, only to return dejected. At the doorway, a group of homeless men emerged. He had a bad feeling. He ran inside and saw a sight that made his eyes split with rage. His wife, lying on the ground, clothes disheveled, covered in blood. He carefully lifted her into his arms. She was already gone. That day, he buried his wife and buried the foolish version of himself. That day, he vanished. He reappeared 6 years later. 6 years was enough to change everything. Just like the child back then, who had now blossomed into a graceful young woman. And he, completely transformed, stood before her unrecognizable. I quietly recounted this memory, long buried deep within my heart. The two sisters' faces grew increasingly pale. It seems they already knew. Fang Linlin stammered, "Your teacher, Suzhou." Suzhou. That name felt like a lifetime ago. Now, I am Jiang Ran. Fang Linlin. Even now, I still want to ask you, why did you slander me back then? Fang Linlin, bitter lip. I'm sorry, Teacher Sue. It was just a joke. I didn't know things would turn out so badly for you. Really, I didn't mean to hurt you. It's too late for apologies. Do you know? My wife was over 3 months pregnant when she died. That day, I lost both my wife and my child. Fang Linlin trembled even more violently. Husband, no. Teacher Sue, I never slandered you. I cut her off. You indeed never slandered me directly, but you were the one who spread the initial rumors. Am I wrong? Fang Yan's lips also turned pale in an instant. She stammered, Teacher Sue, I really didn't know it would harm you like this. If I had known, I definitely wouldn't have said anything. I was so young then, I didn't understand. Please, can't you just let it go? I shook my head. Being young is no excuse for wrongdoing. Teacher Sue, I really know I was wrong. Please, let me go. The real culprit is my cousin. If she hadn't slandered you, you wouldn't have ended up like this. Fang Yan, have you no shame? If it weren't for you spreading those rumors, Teacher Sue wouldn't be in this situation. You're the one who deserves this the most. I watched them tear at each other, unmoved. Husband, they say a day as husband and wife equals 100 days of grace. I really know I was wrong. Give me a chance, and I'll make it up to you. Fang Yan pleaded, don't you want children? I'll give you children, lots and lots of children. No one but my wife is worthy of bearing my children, and I won't have children with anyone else. I cut her off. But we've already been intimate. Maybe I already have our baby. I scoffed. Fang Yan, you and Fang Linlin are 2 peas in a pod. The thought of touching either of you disgusts me. How could I let you carry my child? Impossible. Who else could have been in that room that night? But you. Fang Yan's composure crumbled. She screamed her denial. Fang Linlin gradually calmed down. Whether you're Su Zhou or Jiang Ran, you've already avenged yourself enough. Can't you just stop? Besides, your wife's death at the hands of those vagrants has nothing to do with us. If you're so capable, go after them. They're already waiting for you in hell. Remembering those scum, my voice chilled. You're going to kill us? Are you crazy? Murder is a crime. You'll be executed. I sneered inwardly. From the moment my wife died, I lived only for revenge. A sound came from the doorway. Finally, they're slow. Jiang Ran, you bastard. I treated you well. What the hell are you doing? Fang Hai roared the moment he saw me, his face contorted with rage. He looked nothing like the elegant and shrewd businessman he usually was. Understandable. The company he built with his own hands, ruined. His beloved daughter, held hostage, played like a fool. It must sting. Dad, it's Su Zhou. He's had plastic surgery. He's back for revenge. Fang Linlin shouted. Uncle, save me. I'm scared. Fang Yan cried. Fang Hai looked at me, his voice cold. What exactly do you want? I smiled, speaking slowly. Chairman Fang, let's play a happy little game of choose one. The muzzle of my gun pointed at the 2 of them. 2 people, you can take one. The one that remains dies. Hearing this, all 3 of their faces drastically changed. Jiang Ran, if you dare to hurt even a hair on there. Bang! A gunshot was his reply. I blew on the smoking muzzle. If you continue with this useless nonsense, the next bullet goes through their heads. Date. Fang Linlin was too scared to make sound, only able to look at him with pleading eyes. Uncle, save me, I don't want to die. He's crazy. He's a devil. He'll kill me. He'll kill me. Fang Yan screamed, her words tumbling out incoherently. I watched him with interest. Chairman Fang, have you chosen yet? Tell me who dies. Jiang Ran. Another gunshot answered him. Uncle, save me. It hurts so much. Save me. You've always loved me the most. You have to save me. There was a bloody hole in Fang Yan's arm, and she cried out in pain. Chairman Fang still hasn't learned his lesson. I looked at Fang Linlin. Where should the next shot go? He had a ferocious look on his face. After a long moment, he gritted his teeth and said, let Yin Yin go. Date. Fang Linlin couldn't believe it. One was his biological daughter, the other his niece, and she was the one being abandoned. Unlike Fang Linlin, Fang Yin Yin's face was filled with the immense joy of surviving a disaster. Thank you, uncle. Thank you, uncle. Linlin, do you know why your father chose Fang Yin Yin? I placed my hand on her shoulder and whispered, because Fang Yin Yin is also your father's daughter. She's not his niece at all. Boom. This news struck the 2 sisters like a bolt from the blue. Impossible. You're lying. Fang Linlin vehemently denied. Jiang Ran, shut up. Fang Hai's face flushed red with anger. Yet he dared not make any rash moves because of the miniature bombs on the sisters. Uncle is what he said. True. Fang Yan asked, stunned. Isn't it obvious? Otherwise, Why do you think he would give you up to save a dispensable niece? Is she really just his niece? I said meaningfully. In the company's safe, there are the results of your paternity tests. Fang Linlin kept murmuring, impossible. Ha ha. Interesting, very interesting. This moment has finally arrived. Watching their expressions, I felt an unprecedented exhilaration. The door was kicked open again. A squad of uniformed traffic police filed in, each holding a gun pointed in my direction. The leader was Li Huai. Suzhou, give up resistance and strive for leniency. This is your last chance. Li Huai's face was grim, a stark contrast to his demeanor at the company. Li Huai, I trusted you so much, and you're a cop? Seeing the newcomer, Fang Hai was furious. It was Li Huai and I who jointly emptied his company. Enemies meeting is exceptionally eye-catching. Li Huai didn't even glance at him. The officers behind him had already stepped forward and subdued him. Officer Li, don't be so nervous. We're old acquaintances after all. I smiled at him. You've been undercover at Fengshe Group for so long, waiting for this moment, right? Now the net is finally cast. We should celebrate. Fengshe Group has many illegal businesses. If I hadn't been involved personally, I wouldn't have known they were still engaging in such dirty dealings all these years. The evidence Li Huai submitted is enough to have Fang Hai die 10,000 deaths to appease public anger. Suzhou, I've thoroughly investigated your case. Rest assured, after we leave here, we'll immediately release a public statement proving your innocence and clear your name. I chuckled. Officer Li, I'm not a child. For the murders of those homeless men, my death sentence is inevitable. At this point, whether or not my name is cleared is irrelevant. Li Huai frowned, his voice deep. Even if you killed them, it won't change anything. Why? Officer Li, there's no need to say more. You have two choices. 1. Leave with your men. Fang Hai stays. 2. I kill them first, then you kill me. I pressed the gun harder against Fang Yan's head. Compared to Fang Linlin, I hated Fang Yan more. If it weren't for her malicious lies and fabrications, none of this would have happened. But Fang Linlin isn't innocent either. They both deserve to die. Suzhou, do you really want mutually assured destruction? Think about your wife. How heartbroken would she be if she knew what you've become? I froze. My wife had long been murdered by these people. You talk too much. 3 seconds. If you don't get out, I'll shoot. 3, 2. I counted silently. Seeing they hadn't moved, the gun in my hand was ready. Don't be rash. We're leaving. Li Huai didn't dare gamble. He waved his hand and led his men out. Just as they stepped out the door, a tremendous explosion erupted from inside. The shockwave sent them flying. From the outside, the room was ablaze. Without a doubt, no one inside survived. Epilogue. My name is Li Huai. I'm a criminal investigator. I was ordered to investigate drug trafficking and human trafficking at the Fang Corporation. There was evidence pointing to the Fang Corporation, but every attempt led to a dead end. My superiors assigned me to go undercover. During my undercover operation, I met Jiang Ran. The more I got to know him, the more I realized he wasn't as simple as he appeared. I watched him climb the ranks. He seemed to have guessed my identity, but he never told Fang Hai. This was enough to show that he and Fang Hai were not on the same side. We were both collecting evidence against the Fang Corporation, but he ultimately beat me to it. Later, the Scar incident made Jiang Ran highly valued by Fang Hai. In the interrogation room, I questioned Scar and learned that the incident was orchestrated by Jiang Ran himself. Following this lead, the truth surfaced. I rushed the scene with my men, but we still couldn't prevent the casualties. He carried the weight of multiple lives and ultimately couldn't escape the judgment of the law. Perhaps he knew this from the start, so he never intended to leave himself a way out. When we found the bodies, they were completely charred, horrifically disfigured, and nauseating. Several colleagues vomited on the spot. Jiang Ran was truly intelligent. He was stalling Fang Hai from the beginning. He never intended to let any of them live. At the same time, he was also kind-hearted. If we had been a moment later leaving that explosion, there would have been more than 4 bodies inside. His only desire was revenge, but he never harmed innocent people. The next morning, I received a letter and a card, written by Jiang Ran the day before he chose to die. Officer Li, by the time you read this letter, I'm most likely gone. My life has been a tragedy, lived only for revenge. I can see you're a righteous man, someone who can't stand those insidious schemes. So, for the sake of our joint effort in bringing down Fang Hai, I'd like to ask you to bury me on the slope of the small western village. My wife is there. She's been alone there for so many years, she must be bored. I'll go keep her company. The card contains the money I got from selling off Fang's assets. It's probably a few hundred million. Please donate a portion to the Lian AI orphanage, a portion to the small village where I was born, and the rest to those in need. If possible, Please look after my parents and don't let them know about my death. Thank you. I will repay your kindness in the next life.